Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us in the breakout room. This is a middle school breakout session of our workshop supporting the mental health and well-being of our kids. Welcome. We will begin in a minute. Now, I will just review quickly some of the housekeeping notes that once again, because we are in a new Teams environment, if you require the subtitles, they are available in simplified Chinese, Arabic, French, Hindu, and Urdu and Vietnamese. To turn on those live captions and subtitles, you will have to select Caption Subtitles On in your video controls. To change the caption language, you will have to select Settings, then Caption Subtitles, and choose the language of your choice. Now I would like to present to you the staff that we have, the staff and the parents that we have with us tonight. Our facilitator is Monica Murray, registered psychotherapist and psychoeducational consultant with the Peel District School Board. We have with us moderators that are reviewing the question and answer section. Tally Aikenhead, the Mental Health Resource Team social worker, Dr. Andrea Miri Nurse, psychologist and PDSB psychology manager. And then behind the scenes, we have Meryl Nash, PDSB coordinator of social emotional learning and student support, Tanya Galloway, psychoeducational consultant, and Tajinder Botoya and Jolene Matthews, who are administrators at our school board. And I can't forget our producer, Russell McKechnie. Myself and Carla Bailey are reps from PIC, and we will also be available to support discussion after. Thank you so much, and I will turn it over now to Monica Murray. Monica, are you?
Sorry, I was having technical issues. I apologize. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight. We're going to go over some great strategies for the middle school age group. And ideally, it's going to be going over some strategies of how we can support the mental health and well-being of our kids. So we're going to start with this first slide. And it's important to talk about what mental health is and mental illness as well, because sometimes these terms are confused. What we're going to learn tonight is that mental health is actually a good thing, and that we all have mental health, and it's kind of like physical health. We take care of our physical health on a regular basis, and now we're just going to learn some strategies to promote mental health. So because there's some confusion about mental health and mental illness, what we're going to do is watch a short video that answers the question about what the difference is between these two terms. And while you're watching the video, I ask you to maybe jot some things down in the question and answer bar of anything that you do in your homes or with your family that promote positive well-being. So just keep that in mind as you watch the video.
Mental health is an important part of our overall well-being and is something we all can play a role in addressing. It's a subject that deserves our attention. According to Statistics Canada, 1 in 3 Canadians will experience one of 6 mental illnesses or substance use disorders in their lifetime. Other research for the Mental Health Commission of Canada shows that, in any given year, 1 in 5 Canadians will experience a mental illness or addiction. Awareness has been raised about the importance of helping those experiencing mental illness to get access to treatments that will improve their mental health. But what about the 4 in 5? Or 80% of the population, who will not experience a mental illness or an addiction? What about their mental health? Are they mentally healthy? First, what is mental health? There is some confusion about what mental health means, and this can have an impact on how we address mental health. For example, a lot of people think that when we talk about mental health, we're talking about mental illness, that these subjects are one and the same. Really, mental health and mental illness are two different things. Mental illnesses are conditions where our thinking, mood, and behaviors severely and negatively impact how we function in our lives. Mental illnesses can include depression, anxiety, schizophrenia, and other mood disorders. Mental health, on the other hand, like the term health, is a positive concept. It relates to our ability to enjoy life and to manage it in ways that help us reach our goals and cope with stresses. It's a sense of spiritual and emotional well-being. This means mental health is more than the absence of mental illness. Now, if mental health and mental illness are two different ideas, what's the relationship to one another? Sometimes people picture mental health and mental illness being two ends of a continuum, as if one is the opposite of the other. But a lot of research shows that we should think about mental health and mental illness as separate yet interconnected concepts that need to be looked at, measured, and responded to differently. We should think of them on two separate continua. So here's what the mental health and mental illness continua really look like. On the mental illness continuum, one end runs from severe mental illness to no mental illness. On the mental health continuum, one end runs from poor mental health to good mental health. This model shows that a person without mental illness is not necessarily mentally healthy. They may be feeling down or experiencing a high level of stress because of life's circumstances. But it also shows us that we can all strive for good mental health, that even individuals with mental illness can have good mental health. Let me give you an example. This is Tara. Tara has been diagnosed with depression, a potentially severe mental illness. However, her depression is now under control. She's on medication and sees her psychotherapist regularly. She likes her job, feels capable of completing her work, and is able to eat right, sleep well, and exercise. She feels comfortable and respected in the places where she lives and works, and she feels like people in her life love her and understand her. Despite her mental illness, Tara has good mental health. So how do we promote mental health? How do we make more people mentally healthy? While there are things we can do to take care of our own mental health, the community where we live, work, and play has a big impact on our mental health. A community can promote mental health when its members have access to good jobs, incomes, and housing. A mentally healthy community makes people feel safe and secure and like they belong, because it's inclusive of people with different ages, backgrounds, genders, languages, and sexualities. There are simple things that you can do to help create a community that is mentally healthy. Know and accept that everyone faces daily challenges. Get involved in your community and give back. Support and include different types of people in your community. Finally, there are many things that you can do to take care of your own mental health, whether you have a mental illness or not. Know and accept that life can be challenging. Create purpose in your life by learning and trying new activities, like starting a hobby and setting realistic goals. Create healthy, trusting relationships with people who accept and support you. Know and accept your strengths and weaknesses. Accept yourself and others. It's the basis of self-esteem. And learn to recognize and understand that you and others have good and bad feelings. By increasing good mental health, all of these things contribute to the overall health of Canadians. Like the World Health Organization famously said, there is no health without mental health. Mental health is an important
Okay, so as was mentioned in the video, there's a little definition that might help in terms of from the World Health Organization that also describes what mental health is. And one way of looking at mental health is just feeling mentally at ease. And when we're in that positive frame of mind, we're able to reach our own potential. We're able to manage regular stressors that come up. We're able to function in our regular routine, such as going to work and contributing to community. So all of that is indicative of good mental health. Indigenous teachings also speak of a model where there's a balance between mental, physical, spiritual, and emotional elements that come together. And when this is all balanced and at play, we derive purpose and hope and meaning in our regular lives, and a sense of belonging as well. So it's important to remember that the video reminds us that we all have mental health and that we should all strive to work on our mental health. So it doesn't mean that if we're struggling or we have periods of poor mental health, it doesn't mean that we have mental illness. And likewise, we also learned that having a mental illness doesn't mean that you can't have good mental health days as well. So it's just two concepts to keep in mind, but tonight's focus is going to be on things that we can do to promote mental health, so in our children and also in ourselves. Okay, so we're going to move on to the next slide. Okay, so as we all know, the last year has been particularly stressful, and that includes children and caregivers as well. So there have been a lot of surveys and studies done to see the impact of the pandemic on our youth. And a survey that was conducted in the early days of the pandemic found that about 60% of students were experiencing poor mental health, or they indicated that their mental health had actually worsened. And that was, as we remember, the school year ended abruptly at the March break time. Things just came to a complete pause. There was a lot of uncertainty as to what was happening. And, our students were isolated from their friends, from their teachers. Some of them switched schools or changed, and they just never got to have those ritual send-offs or, gatherings that would occur at the typical end of the school year. So a lot of the students were reporting things like sadness and just frustration and, like I said, an overall decline in their mental health. Parents were likewise reporting the same thing, and about a third of parents that were studied indicated that they were experiencing moderate to severe anxiety on a daily basis stemming from the pandemic. And we see that because all of a sudden, again, routines were vastly disrupted between schoolwork, online, managing your own work, chores, things around the house, and also having to manage things that remote learning that was completely new, or our children spending more time at home meant, unfortunately, that a lot of them were spending more time on their devices or playing video games and things like that. Sleep routines and meal routines, everything that we had, were used to prior to the pandemic, just seemed to kind of go out the window with the pandemic. So this has been a real struggle for parents and youth alike. And I think even when September rolled around, a lot of parents were conflicted about what to do with their children. Do they go back to school? Do they stay at home? And, the pressures of navigating online learning. So it's been a particularly stressful year. And I guess when we look at the positives that have come from the pandemic, if there are any positives, we see a lot of collective coming together. So there have been, sometimes we watch the news and you see some nice events of people gathering, maybe to sing together, to dance together, you know, gathering to bang on pots and pans to honor our frontline workers. So some of these things have also had like a positive effect in bringing the community together. This is a global crisis that's affecting everybody in different countries as well. So it's kind of been nice in that sense, just to see that coming together effect, that hopefully once the pandemic is resolved and leaves us, we will be able to gain from that coming together and looking after each other a little bit better than perhaps we were used to. So now on the next slide. So now we're going to focus on what parents and caregivers can do to support their children's mental health and well-being. So there is a lot of great information coming up. So on the next slide, we're going to talk about the first step on what parents can do. So the next slide, it shows a nice graph, a little, I hope you can see it. But the idea here is that in order to look after our children's mental health, we kind of need to make sure that we're okay as well, so that we're in a position to look after our own emotions before we are able to take care of our children. So there's a picture on this screen that shows the oxygen mask that you would see on an airplane. And the idea is, for those, you know, who've traveled, when you get the safety announcements, they always say, you know, make sure that you put on your mask first before you take care of others with you. So the idea is that in order to look after somebody else, like young children, for example, we need to be fully replenished and in a good place ourselves in order to do that. Because if we're run down, i.e. if we don't have oxygen, it makes it that much more challenging to spread ourselves to look after our children. So this is a nice illustration that helps us look at how we're feeling to gauge how our own emotions are. So if we see like the green column where it says thriving, like this is how you know, kind of measure how your emotions are at the moment. So if you're feeling calm and generally, you know, steady, that you can, you know, manage and maybe have very minor mood fluctuations that day, you know, your emotional functioning is doing quite well. The next column is the yellow column, and maybe that's just a day where you feel like you're just on survival mode. You know, you might feel a little bit nervous, a little bit sad, maybe a little bit prone to some mood fluctuations, but you're managing, you're getting through the day and doing what you have to do. Then we move into that orange column, and that can be when you find that yourself struggling emotionally. So you're feeling like this fear or panic or anxiety, anger is just lingering. It's inside of you. It's hard to you know, do what you need to take care of. You're just struggling to get your things done. And the last column is this red column where it means that your emotions are you're quite run down. So you're actually in a crisis and you're having real difficulty getting through the things that you need to do. So the emotions that you're feeling have become disabling. So they're preventing you from perhaps getting out of bed or going to work or preparing a meal for your family. So you're having panic attacks. You're just not able to function at all. So when we look at how we're feeling on a day-to-day basis, if we think of when we have our oxygen masks on, we're in that green or yellow column. That's where we're at our best in order to maybe handle other stressors in our children and what they're going through. When we're in that orange and red column, in those columns, then that's an indication that we really need to focus on taking care of our own mental health, because we're too depleted to take on our children's emotions at that time. So always make sure that you're like looking after your own mental health before you address your children. And I'll explain that a little bit more as we go, but it's just thought it's really important to have that gauge on a day-to-day basis to know how you're feeling before you commit to doing a lot more. So then on the next slide, we're going to talk about a strategy that we can look at in terms of coaching our children, right? Because sometimes children, especially in the middle school years, you know, children at that age, pandemic aside, so even if COVID-19 did not exist, we would see a lot of change and things happening in those years, because all of a sudden, you know, peers are more important than ever. There's hormonal changes happening. Some kids are thinking in the grade 8 year about high school. So there's a lot going on in those years. And sometimes children are not able to tell us exactly how they're feeling. So they may not say, you know, I'm feeling sad, I'm really feeling overwhelmed, but we might see it from the things that they're saying, from the things that they're doing, and how they appear. So you might notice that your child might be sullen all of a sudden, or, you know, you look at their body language, their gestures, tone of voice, or some of the maybe changes in their behaviors and routines. So it's really important in this area, when we're teaching our kids about emotions, is that we just name them so that we can explain to them what they're going through, and also to validate their emotions. So in this first section, we talk about validating. We talk about just naming the emotion. So if you see that your child is maybe sullen or not themselves, you can just say to them something like, you know, you seem really sad, or you seem really angry. What's going on? And hopefully that will be a nice opener for them to tell you. And they might say, actually, I'm not angry, I'm just really sad. I haven't been able to see my friends. And as parents, obviously, I think there isn't a parent that wants to see their child's angry or sad or suffering in any way, but we really need to hear them out and let them just feel, you know, validate their emotions. It's tempting to say, oh, no, there's no reason for you to be sad. Things aren't that bad. And kind of brush it aside with good intentions. But I think it's really important to hear them out and connect with them rather than direct them. So don't tell them how to feel or how not to feel, but just to hear them out and provide them with that connection. So provide them with some support and let them know that it's okay, especially this past year, when things that our kids would normally do just to have an outlet for fun and to connect with friends, all of a sudden those things have been taken away. So it's important to kind of normalize it under these really abnormal times that we're living in. What they're feeling is normal. So it's normal to feel angry, it's normal to feel sad, and let them know that you're there for them and that you're able to talk to them or hear them out whenever they need that support. And depending on the age, I know again this age group can be a little bit tricky, but if you can engage them in something else that you can do, like watching a movie together or playing a game or having a meal together, you know, those are just wonderful activities that act as a distraction and help to build that connection as well. Okay, so we can move on to the next slide. Okay, so on the next slide, we're going to talk about an activity in terms of when we teach emotions as well. So one of the ideas here is with, we're going to look at anxiety or tension as an example. So School Mental Health Ontario has a lot of resources, and it's on a slide, and I think in your packages you'll be able to access some of the resources from the poster. But they talk about some activities that help with relaxation. So when we think about how we feel when we're stressed, we might have physical symptoms such as shortness of breath, heart racing, tension, headaches, you know, stomach upset. All of those things are usually indicators that we're just stressed and anxious. So our body responds with those physical symptoms. And unfortunately, a lot of us have a habit of just ignoring those and just pushing along and doing what we need to do. But this strategy or these techniques are useful because they allow us to have a break from that stress and from that tension, which over time, if we don't address it, just becomes really debilitating. And I think it's also something that we can do as parents and that we can also teach our children to do, because unfortunately, stress will, appear every now and then when we least expect it. And it's a good thing to just have some useful strategies to do to help take the edge off and to help us to relax. So we're actually going to go through one of the activities, this tense and relax activity. So you're welcome to either, everyone's on their own, so which is kind of nice, but you can just kind of close your eyes if that helps so that you can experience the relaxation a little bit better. So the idea here is we're going to take a few deep breaths. And when you breathe in, hold your breath for a couple of seconds. And then take a deep breath out. Okay. And again, take another deep breath in. And breathe out. Okay, so now what I'd like you to do is to squeeze your hands into fists and hold them tight in a fist for 1, 2, 3. Okay, and now relax your hands and notice the different feelings that you have between your hands being tense and your hands being relaxed. Okay. Now in the next part, what I'd like you to do is just to push up your shoulders way up high, up to your ears, almost like a turtle going back into its shell. And again, hold this for 1, 2, 3, and now relax. So let that tension just wash away. Okay. Now, for this part, push your heels into the floor and squeeze your toes for 1, 2, 3, and release. And now wiggle your toes out. Okay. And now for this last part, tense your stomach muscles for 1, 2, 3. And now release. Take another deep breath in. And then a deep breath out. And last time, a deep breath in. And a deep breath out. Okay, so that was a very, very short activity for relaxation that is important, that we can do anytime, anywhere, and even if it's chaotic at home and you can slip into the bathroom for 2 minutes and just do some breathing and creating that tension and then relaxing it is a good way to loosen up just some of that tension that we carry in our bodies without even realizing that we're doing it. So I encourage you to go to that School Mental Health Ontario resource, and they have a lot of other great relaxation activities as well. Okay, so now we're going to move on to the next slide. Okay, so this slide talks about 5 strategies that we can use as well to promote positive mental health. So as we talked about things that we do for physical health, like, making sure that we have proper sleep, that we're eating well, that we're sleeping properly and drinking lots of water, for example. This model shows us things that we can do to take care of our mental health. So this model was actually developed in the UK, and when practiced regularly, the Big Five is meant to improve one's sense of personal well-being. Okay, so as I talk about some of these examples in the different areas, again, please feel free to share some things that you and your family are doing that are helping you to promote positive well-being at this time. Okay, and then I'll check in with the moderator for some examples. Okay, so the first area that we're going to talk about is the practice of connecting. Okay, so these are activities that we do to build connection with others. So, talking to people, listening, interacting, those social ties that we have common interests with people. And during these COVID times, it's obviously a little bit more challenging because we're not able to visit or interact with people outside of our homes. But there are a lot of groups online, a lot of people are having maybe Teams meetings or Zoom meetings online just to maintain that connection with their social communities. So there's a lot of family, cultural, and even faith-based activities that you can join in. Again, watching the news, which isn't always uplifting, unfortunately, but sometimes we see these nice stories of families that are celebrating milestone birthdays with loved ones who are perhaps in a senior's home. So where there's a family that drives up and they bring balloons and everybody's wearing their masks and they're socially distanced, but they're still honoring a loved one who they can't see in person to celebrate a special event. So that's something that people are still, whatever you can do to connect with the important people in your life, it's a very strong strategy to implement. The next one is to be active, and be active doesn't necessarily mean like train or commit to something that you're not interested in or that you don't have the stamina for. It just means to move your body, to take a break, to walk, to dance, to and it might even be to do some stuff around the house, like some chores or something that gets your blood flowing, just to keep you moving. Again, we have to sometimes be a little bit creative because we are confined to our homes or we're doing a lot of things in isolation. So it doesn't have to be anything that exceeds your fitness level, but just something that keeps you moving, essentially. Okay, the third piece relates to keep learning. And again, with COVID and being indoors, I've heard from a lot of people who have taken the time just because being at home, and all of a sudden there's a lot of free time being at home every evening and every weekend, and people have taken things like art classes or painting or they've taken up sewing and things that they never would have had the time to do before. But it's a great way to keep your mind stimulated, to keep you motivated, and to keep you involved. These are strategies that help you to cope with stress as well. So it's really important to find something that interests you and to keep learning. The next practice is about giving back. So is there anything that you can give to your community? Is it your time, your words? Do you have a skill? Anything that strengths or gifts that you have that you can share with other people? Helping others, makes us feel good. It boosts our well-being, but it also you share the joy with other people. So you're bringing happiness to others, and there's like a contagion effect. So giving back is something that's really, really effective for boosting our mental health. And the last thing is taking notice. So again, sometimes it's hard. We take notice of a lot of things that aren't going well in our lives, or the things that we are, our problems and the things that are causing us stress. And it's really hard to kind of shift to looking at the things that are going well. What are the things that we are grateful for? What are the things that we, that we have that are boosts to us, that are special to us? Anything that you, family, relationships, anything that you have, it may not be a huge thing, but it's good to take notice of those little things, because again, they distract us from the problems, the stressors that we tend to focus on. Okay, so training our minds to focus on those things that we're grateful for is another good strategy for boosting our mental health. Okay, so now we're going to move on to the next slide. So we've talked about things that we can do. So in terms of taking care of ourselves, coaching our children to learn about their emotions, and recognizing, and even talking to our kids about how we're feeling, and just coaching them about how we take care of ourselves, how we do some relaxation, how we go for a walk, and those things. The next step is to recognize when we see our children, and we're the experts on how our children feel, how they're doing. We know them better than anybody. So there may be times when you recognize that some of the things that you're seeing are telling us that maybe we need to seek support, that maybe we need more help. So we're not going to get into too much detail, but so when we talk about frequency, like there's the 4 kind of red flags to look for when more support may be needed. So for example, when we look at frequency right now under these times, a lot of students are experiencing those mental health concerns, as we talked about earlier. So a lot of just sadness, is big loss, things, life isn't like it used to be, and there's a lot of disruption to routines and what we're doing. So there's a lot of negative emotions that have been stirred up. However, when we look at things like sadness, so I'll give an example of if a child loses a loved one or a beloved pet, we would expect that they would experience some sadness and be devastated by this event. However, if they're kind of experiencing the same level of sadness, but there hasn't been a death, there hasn't been a loss of that nature, that's an indicator that something is, you may need to seek more support, so that the sadness or severity or the frequency that this child is displaying these emotions doesn't really match. There's nothing in the environment that has occurred to match what they're displaying. Likewise with duration. So again, it's important to recognize that, if your child is preparing to do a speech or is taking a test or an exam, that they would experience some anxiety or some nervousness leading up to that activity. But once that activity is over, we would expect that anxiety and that nervousness to resolve. So again, if those tests or exams or big events that are coming up have passed, and your child is still exhibiting anxiety or distress long past the event, that's another red flag to be aware of. Okay, and then we talk about intensity too. So all children get upset and they're frustrated, and especially now, students have been home since, in Peel, they've been home since before the winter break in December. So it's been 2 months of siblings, parents, everybody being cooped up in the same home. So it's again, under these conditions, it's normal to have some, not everybody's going to be in a good mood every single day. However, when we see some reactions that do not match that are disproportionate with the situation. Like if you knock over a glass, sure, it's frustrating and, you know, it's a pain, you have to clean up and so forth. But, you know, to have a full-blown rage or an outburst with kicking stuff over or doing things that are really, really way beyond what you would expect for the situation. So, you know, keep an eye on those things. And lastly, the impact, right? If your child is sad or not, or you see that emotionally they're not doing well, and you see that it's impacting, for example, their schoolwork, their family interactions, and not so much right now, but if they lose interest in things that they would normally do. So for example, a child who loves to play video games all of a sudden says, no, I don't even want to play video games anymore. Things like that. So when you have these emotions that are being displayed at a frequency that you wouldn't expect for longer than you would expect at a higher intensity, and they're causing an impact in their daily activities, these are good indicators that you would consider seeking more support. Okay, and in the next slide, we're going to look at places where you can access that support. So in this slide, we talk about, you know, reaching for support at your child's school. And sometimes that's information parents just maybe don't realize that there's a lot of good supports for mental health in your child's school. So one way to access support is by reaching out to the school administration. So the principal or vice principal at the school are good resources, and they can connect you with the services that are available. You talk to your child's teacher, or if they're connected with the in-school support personnel teacher, there are also great resources, a guidance counselor, depending on your school. And as was mentioned earlier in the presentation, you know, students at middle school have social workers and psychology staff as part of their team. So, you know, talking to the administrator or teacher is a good way to get your child's linked with one of us at the school for additional supports and resources as well. So please just make a note that there are great resources in the school setting, and these are some steps that you can follow to access support through your school. And in the next slide, we talk about you know, reaching out for support in the community as well. So a lot of agencies right now are continuing to provide support to students and their families, although most of the services are virtual because of the restrictions that we have to adhere to. But you know, you might reach out, maybe there's a family member that your child is really close to, they have a close bond, and then you might think, you know, maybe my child can talk to their aunt about this, or I can have my sister call my child and ask them like what's going on, and they can share and talk about whatever is bothering your child if they have that connection with a family member. There are lots of agencies in the community, there are faith leaders that you can turn to, and in your package, the handout, there's also some great resources and agencies that are specific to mental health and children's mental health. Okay, so please make sure that you review that material, because there are a lot of great resources about how to access support for mental health in the community. Okay, and in the next slide. Okay, so again, so even though there are great resources for mental health support through the school and in the community, we're aware that, you know, factors such as stigma and discrimination sometimes prevent families and students from accessing these supports. So both stigma, you know, around mental health is a huge factor, because either students or their families believe that their child will be treated in a negative way because of their mental health struggles. Likewise, there's a perception that students will perceive discrimination because of mental health problems. So these, you know, not reaching out for support because of the stigma and discrimination factors, unfortunately, serves to compound the mental health problems and makes it worse because it prevents somebody from actually seeking the support that they could benefit from. So sometimes people worry that they'll be judged differently or treated differently if they seek out for help. So just bear in mind that wherever you go, whether it's through your school or through your community, professionals are there to provide compassion and confidential service. So this is something that's only for you and your family. It is not, you know, unless you share with the community if stigma is an issue, it doesn't go anywhere. So I really encourage you, if you see some of those signs that we talked about, or if you're just looking for some general support to boost your mental health and your child's mental health, that you access these great resources that are available, okay? Because working together is the way that we want to support our students, and clearly we want to be part of the solution as well. Okay, so I will now turn things over back to Romana, who's our parent rep, and she has some more information to share.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. That was a great presentation, Monica. So we have pulled together a few resources. Now, these are not an exhaustive list. There's many, many other organizations and services available, but these were ones that we had pulled together that we thought immediately could be of help. So if you are in a crisis situation, or if there is something that's happening more imminently, then we encourage you to reach out to one of these. So we have Kids Help Phone, there's an Indigenous helpline, Black African Caribbean Community Support Line, there's a multilingual distress line. Now that one, they have operators available that speak in different languages. So if you need to speak to somebody, for example, in Punjabi or Arabic or Somali, they will be able to help and facilitate. There's also LGBTQ Youth Line. We've noted that, you know, there are children that are really quite desperately in need of help, so there is that assistance available. And then there's a few other ones that are more specific to faith-based. So Naziha, although I should say that if you call any of these lines, no one will turn you away if you don't fall in under that sort of catchment identity group, but they may help to direct you. So Nazia Helpline and NISA Helpline do focus more on Muslim youth and Muslim women. Then there's the Sikh Family Helpline. And finally, we also have listed suicide prevention services. And these are just a few. There are many others, but as I said, these are the ones that we had put together for tonight. We would also now like to go to the next slide. Thank you. So we just would like to acknowledge that it's taken some time and effort to put together the presentation tonight, and Monica did an amazing job, but on the back end, we have a whole crew of people who've been working diligently for a few weeks. So this is the end of our formal presentation, but we do have feedback that we would love to get from our audience members. So there's a link there, bit.ly/caregiver feedback. We would love to get feedback from our participants. For additional information, although right now the Peel School Board's website may not be fully functional, but there are resources available at the PDSB Student Mental Health and Wellbeing site. And then we also have a family toolkit, and there is an organization, the Family Education Center, that does also have some resources available in a few different languages and specifically geared towards parenting during the pandemic. So I think now we will be opening the session up to having some questions and answers. Thank you again.
That's right. Thank you so much, Romana. And thank you, Monica, as well for a fabulous presentation. My name is Tally Aikenhead. I'm a social worker with the school board on the board's mental health resource team. And I will be helping to moderate our Q&A portion of tonight's session. So we've got about 10 minutes. Maybe we'll try to honor the 15-minute timeline for Q&A, and then I'll bring us to a close for the evening. We have a variety of panelists and folks here to help with responding to your questions, a variety of roles, backgrounds, and identities, including parent reps, administrators, as well as professional support staff, including psychology and social work staff. So each person will be responding to your questions from their own personal and professional experience for sure. We'll try to get to as many questions as possible. You can submit questions live through the Q&A feature, and questions will be seen by moderators. Questions that we don't have a chance to get to tonight, we will be posting on peelschools.org. We're currently working with communications on the exact URL and webpage within the board site that it will be posted on, so please check the board's social media channels following today's event to access the Q&A document, the recordings from tonight, and the parent handout as well if you're interested. A quick note that certainly the responses tonight are more for general information and shouldn't be seen as a replacement for the support of a helper who knows you, who knows your child or teen, who knows your family. So just to keep that in mind as well. All right, so I think we will begin with our very first question, and this one I might ask Dr. Andrea Myrie-Nurse if you're comfortable chiming in here. The question is, hi there, my son, the only child in my house, feels every weekday is almost the same. He's doing online class and virtual interaction with his teacher and peers, but he feels bored. What's some good advice to help him out? So wondering if you're comfortable, Dr. Myrie-Nurse, offering a few reflections on this question.
Thank you, Tally. Yes, I am comfortable. You know, during this time, during this pandemic, and particularly during this shutdown, and we're all in the house for the last 20 some odd days, I think every day for all of us feels like every other day. And to all of us, it is quite boring. So it's not unusual for this young son to be feeling this way as he's online, if he was even online prior to the shutdown. So the answers I'm thinking would be really dependent on the age of the child, but what I'm going to be using really is what Monica was presenting, the 5 areas of well-being. And I thought it was really nicely organized in order to kind of frame how we can help this young man to kind of, you know, broaden his scope of activities and hopefully through that feel quite good. Being online all day is quite boring, and being visual or virtual, sorry, can really hurt the eyes and mind. So it's important to break up that time. And one way, as Monica would say, is connections. You know, we are disconnected. Even though we're in a house full of people, we're disconnected. And perhaps he needs to be connected with his friends. That could be through Zoom calls, Zoom, or even phone calls, to just connect with friends, have some time to play. Teenagers, they have discovered this game on internet called Amongst Us, which I know my children have a great time playing with their friends, and you hear them laughing. It's a matter of being creative and finding ways outside of our usual norms to connect with people. But it's important to connect. Being active, perhaps break up his day by going outside and enjoy, as cold as it may be, just enjoy outside. The days that it was very snowy, going tobogganing, or just enjoying as the weather warms up, perhaps going hiking. There's a lot of paths, or discovering your neighborhood. but just taking some time to go out for walks and getting some fresh air and some sunshine, get some natural vitamin Ds, can also help change the mood. I love the idea of giving back. It's, it is so true that when we give back to make someone feel good, we also feel good in that process. And, talk to your son. I don't know how old this little boy is, but in any little way that he can make someone else happy can make him happy. And it's actually a life lesson. Family time. Perhaps it's a house full of adults. Spend some time with him. Spend some time playing board games, playing video games with him. Play his video games and have fun with him. Watching movies or TV shows, having family time in that way. I hope that answers the question. And, ultimately it's thinking outside the box, breaking the routine, and understand that everyone at this present time feels very bored. It's not unusual.
Thank you so much, Dr. Myrie Nurse. You've shared lots of great ideas and suggestions there. It's very much appreciated. This next question that's come in is focused on discussing mental health with children. So the question is, how can we approach our kids about mental health without them feeling like we're accusing them of having a problem or getting defensive? That's a great question. I wonder, Dr. Tanya Galway, I'm wondering if you wouldn't mind maybe looking at this question and offering some comments.
Absolutely. Thank you. Yeah, this is a really important question, and one that a lot of parents and caregivers and guardians have. And what I find typically helps for families is to talk with their children often and openly about mental health and wellness. This really opens the line of communication. It helps to build a consciousness and awareness about mental health and wellness. It's also important to model good mental health habits and resilience day to day in your own life. This helps children develop an understanding and also the tools that they need to cope with many of the ups and downs that they might experience. If you are concerned or worried about your child's mental health and wellness, a good place to start is to talk with them, to sit down, find a quiet time, a time without distractions, a calm time. Start by reassuring your child that they can tell you anything and that you won't be angry. Tell them what you notice and express your concerns. Ask them about their thoughts and feelings. Listen and validate their struggles. Or in some cases, some of our children, when we ask them, they'll tell us that there's nothing wrong, and they'll tell us to leave them alone. In those cases, try to stay calm. You've already started this conversation and created a safe place for them to talk to you when they're ready. Let them know that there are supports and people to talk to within your family, within the school, within the community. And sometimes, even in my own life, I will leave things on the refrigerator, things like Kids Help Phone, so that my children know that they can call these numbers and get support as needed. Let them know that you're glad that, let them know that you're there for them at any point in time, that things can get better, and also that when they're ready and if they're open, you will help them get connected to supports and services that they need.
Thank you, Dr. Galway. I appreciate that. I'm conscious of time. There is another question, actually. This question has come through twice, so I'd really like to make sure that we get it. It is about conflict and feelings of anger and frustration at home, so some behavior-related questions. And I'd love to hear from staff and potentially a parent rep as well. So the question is, could you please share strategies for controlling aggressive behavior, shouting and banging doors, and any resistance to instruction given? Thanks again. And another parent wrote similarly, my daughter does very well at school. Her teachers feel like we've done a great job raising her, but at home, her behavior during the pandemic has been up and down, resisting instructions, things that aren't getting her way, causes her to raise an argument, shouting doors, screaming, etc. So please know that you're not alone. We've had at least 2 questions about this, but I'm wondering, Monica Murray, maybe would you mind? And then I'm wondering too if Ramana Siddiqui wouldn't mind weighing in on this question. Maybe if we start with you, Monica, would you mind sharing?
Sure, thank you. The way when I did that exercise a little bit earlier with the relaxation and attention, I think sometimes anger is, and those outbursts comes from frustration and anger, and you know, those emotions just don't feel well in our body, so we have to get them out of our system. Now, the change in routine that we have right now, where, you know, maybe our children are not getting the same sleep that they used to, lack of activity, just being in the house, those emotions just kind of fester through our bodies. So I would strongly recommend, I guess, just checking in to see what your child's routine is right now. Are they getting adequate sleep? Maybe they're not able to participate in the activities that they used to, but, you know, just going out for a walk after a full day of online screening, online learning rather, is excellent, just to kind of get that energy out of their system. Because I think when we see those behaviors, it's telling us, okay, this child really needs to relax, really needs to unwind, and really needs an outlet. So, and being tired and maybe not sleeping or eating well or not eating properly adds to that crankiness and aggressive behavior as well. So I think it's really that's a good place to start, is encouraging the sleep, the activity, and that relaxation.
Thank you, Monica. And I'm wondering if I can turn it over to Ramana Siddiqui if you would like to share a few comments from your perspective as a parent.
Sure, absolutely. So first of all, I'd like to kind of offer support as a parent that raising children during adolescence, I have found that the middle school years are the super challenging years. I always think, oh gosh, this is the most challenging phase, but truly they're transitioning from being a child to becoming a young adult. And that metamorphosis time period can be very painful for everybody. So, you know, just give yourself a little grace and your child some space about that, you know, there's hormones and all sorts of changes in their body. That aggression and that moodiness does settle down. It might take a couple of years, but most often it does settle a little on its own. And you may find that you have your sort of an older version of that sweet child that you might have been used to from when they were younger. So that's one thing. Second, I've found with time that I've shifted in my thinking from the idea of like kind of controlling my child's behavior or my youth's behavior. I'm trying to now support them more in terms of framing it that what is this behavior communicating to me? Is there a skill that they're not fully developed? Is there some frustration that they can't explain? And often behavior is a form of communication for the adult. It can be a bit of a puzzle for us to sort of try to figure out, and the child or the youth may not even know how to explain it. So it could take a little bit of deciphering on our end, but just trying to frame it in terms of not so much controlling, but empowering your child, trying to help them, trying to model emotional regulation, and just giving them that sense that they make choices. One thing we've also implemented in the past year is rules, rewards, and consequences, which we actually didn't have in our home before, like not in a formal sense. So now that takes some of the power, the sort of imbalance of power, the struggling out of things, and having to sort of be the bad cop or exert discipline. So it's not so much about us enforcing it. So we've explained that, you know, these are some basic rules, these are the rewards that you can earn, and your behavior today in advance earns you the reward tomorrow. So as an example, the phone or a device is a big thing for one of our teens. So them checking off, and it can be simple things like putting away your dishes, or, you know, you can pick whatever the issues are that trigger you as a parent. But if they're doing those things every day, then that earns them their phone time the following day. And if they're not putting it away, instead of it being, you know, a yelling match or whatever, it's just like, okay, so you're making that choice today that you're not following the rules that we've decided on. So that's your choice, but then you're choosing to not have your phone the following day. So it takes it off of the parent, and it kind of puts that responsibility on the child. And that's, I find that that's been helpful.
Thank you, Romana. These aren't easy questions, and certainly the strategies that work for one family may not work for another, and so also so important to be gentle with ourselves as caregivers, for sure. And thank you for your honesty in these questions. I am conscious of time. I'd like to get to one final question. It is very important, and then I think we'll wrap up for the evening. We did have a question just here. Sorry, bear with me. I'm working on a few screens here regarding access to services. So this is coming from a family who accessed wheretostart.ca. So that is the central access point for free child and youth mental health services in Peel. And they've been working on getting an appointment with an intake specialist. And so the question is, what supports and services are available in the meantime? And a similar question that's related is, can the Peel Board provide access to a child psychologist once schools are reopened? And so I'm wondering, I might direct this question to you, Meryl Nash, just concerning services available in the interim, and maybe if you're comfortable touching on professional student services available to families and students from the board as well.
Yeah, thank you, Tali. I felt really compelled to answer the last question regarding a student or a child banging on the door, getting really angry as well, just in the sense that it really, in the height of anger, is not the best time to engage. So often it's really good to kind of wait for the anger or the emotionality to subside. And then kind of let the child know that you're available to talk when you're a little bit calmer. I just wanted to put that out there, because engaging in the middle of a storm kind of just creates a bigger storm. Regarding accessing supports from the community, Where to Start or Every Mind is our mental health organization in the community. However, what a lot of parents probably may not know is one way to access Every Mind in a quicker way is actually through the school board. And so if a parent were concerned around, needing support from Every Mind and wanted to, the waiting list, if you walked in from the street, would be like a year or 6 months, we do have ways within our board through our PSSB, our psych and social workers, to if a parent were to come to the school to request that kind of support, the administrator could pass that on to the in-school review committee to initiate the process. And because we have a memorandum of understanding with Every Mind, we have a little bit of a shorter time frame in terms of accessing supports for parents. And of course, in terms of, because the wait lists are long, going to the school administrator as well just to access PSSP support is a quicker way, but also, you know, maybe through your community, like parent groups within your community, the Tangerine services as well through Every Mind, as well as any faith-based, if you were involved with any faith-based in the community, those are places that would be, you know, quicker access as well. And with regards to accessing PSSP services during the pandemic, absolutely. It's, again, the access is through the school administrator. It's just a request through that, through your administrator, and they will then put you in touch with a PSSP person, a psychologist, psychoed consultant, and or a social worker who can then walk you through how to access support or perhaps provide short-term support services. But that's also available during the pandemic as well. And it can happen virtually, and in some very, very extreme situations, it can happen in person at the school as well.
Thank you, Meryl. I really appreciate that. You know, even just hearing about all of the supports available, it's a lot to navigate and to wade through. And so we thank you so much for your questions. Please don't be shy to reach out to your school administrator or your child's classroom teacher, and they can help you get connected with supports as well. The link to the handout for today's session also lists other supports and resources for you. You'll probably have seen me looking at this screen and then looking at my other screen. There are so many good questions that continue to come in, but unfortunately our time has come to an end for this evening. So what we're going to do is, as a reminder again, is we will be posting the questions that have come in both before the event and during the event, including the questions that we didn't have time to get to, so that we can make sure they don't get missed. We'll have a team of social workers, psychologists, admin, and parent reps looking at those questions to give some thoughtful answers that will then be posted on the board website. So we really encourage you to check back after the event, give us a little bit of time, probably within the next week and a half, we'll have those answers posted for you. And we really encourage you to check that out. I would like to give a huge thank you again to our caregivers, to you folks for attending, to our panelists and parent and staff reps this evening. And again, just to share a quick reminder to please complete our brief survey, 1 or 2 minutes, to let us know how we did this evening and any future topics that you would like to see offered. So thank you so much. And with that, we will end our time together. Be well.